Nice.
Very nice. Bitcoiners, hello.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Jessica.
And
we sell passports.
Quite literally, we help Bitcoiners all over the world to obtain second citizenship or residency to exercise their freedoms. We teach people how to utilize jurisdictional arbitrage and flag theory for their benefit. Now, you may think, we're at Bitcoin convention. What does that have to do with Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is fuck you money, and what we like to talk about is fuck you passports. Why do we call them this? Well, in order to understand, we need to go over a couple of things first. So let's start with KYC, or Know Your Customer.
We're all used to showing identification to pretty much go anywhere. Most, if not all of you, had to show some form of identification, whether it was a driver's license or a passport, in order to get here today. Shout out to Bitcoin Magazine for not requiring ID at the door. But why is this? Why do we have to show some form of identification to get on a plane, to stay at a hotel, or to register on an exchange? KYC requirements were implemented in order to verify the legitimacy of a person's identity. But what some people don't realize is that, in reality, it created a process of checks and balances that ultimately strips people of their privacy and freedom. Just this week, we saw what happened with Celsius and their data leak and people's private information being seen throughout the world. So what happened was you have these authorities imposing these regulations on businesses in order to save customers' privacy. Don't you love it when they look out for us? But today we're talking about shorting the state and how Bitcoin enables flag theory. We know that the government does not put our needs first and will always think about themselves. But in order to think about how Bitcoin enables flag theory, we first need to define what it is and how it came to fruition.
At Plan B Passport, we define flag theory as a way to limit your dependency on any one particular state by obtaining flags from different jurisdictions that are beneficial for you in various ways. Just to put it into perspective, when you shop for your produce, you go to a butcher for the best meat, then you go to the farmer's market for best fruits and veggies, and you go to a bakery for your bread. So the same way we believe we should go about jurisdictions. You got to shop around to find the best regulatory environment for your business and the best lifestyle, the best tax regime and the most safe place for you and your family.
But let's go ahead and back up a bit. Throughout history, having the ability to choose where you want to go is one of the largest forms of freedom we can experience. But unfortunately, it's not available to everyone. I want to briefly go over the law lectures by James Wilson. Wilson was one of the few men who signed both the Declaration of Independence and the American Constitution. And he later went on to become a Supreme Court justice. And his law lectures are a significant exposition of American law and are especially applicable today. Wilson himself said that everyone is at liberty to choose the state of which he wishes to be a member. He then later recognizes the game theory at play, saying that those states which manage their affairs best will offer the strongest inducements to their own citizens to remain and to others to incorporate among them. Meaning, basically, having the ability to choose where you want to go and where fits you best is one of the largest forms of liberty that we can experience. But like I said, if you have a weak travel document and don't have access to the majority of the world, you're kind of stuck. So what happened?
What happened is you look at any point in history and there is government. You open any history book and there is government. You open an Old Testament and guess what? There's government there. And surprise, surprise, the government was bad. But only bad enough to stay intact and for people to just let it go and being convinced that it's for their goods and for their freedom, for their rights. And this is where we ended up with. We ended up when the government has nearly endless power and monopoly over you. What do I mean by monopoly over you? Let me ask you a question first. How many of you have left the country where you were born and raised and now live somewhere else? I want to see hands.
Ooh.
Bitcoiners are always good at breaking statistics. But outside of this convention, only 3.6% have turned towards a competitor government, making their country of birth an effective monopoly with over 96% of market domination. Sounds pretty crazy. And not only they have this monopoly over you, they make it nearly impossible to switch the service provider, to switch the jurisdiction. And this is where we currently stand.
And now let's look at our current reality. We are born in a non-consensual monopoly with the state having power over you since you leave your mother's womb. At birth, you're assigned a tax number, a passport number, and a birth certificate. But why would I need to show you that I'm alive when I'm standing right here in front of you breathing? But this is the current reality that we're standing in. So how did we let this happen? If you look back at history, you'll notice that the major increases in identification bureaucracy came in the form of a crisis. So what do I mean when I say crisis? Basically, you can think of a crisis as any situation in which it'll negatively impact a person and it will not allow them to react as they would in a normal situation. Let's go through a couple examples. First, we had the Panic of 1907, otherwise known as the 1907 Bankers' Panic. And what basically happened was, over a 3-week period, the New York Stock Exchange fell 50% from its peak the previous year. So how did they solve this crisis? Well, they created the Federal Reserve in 1913, which obviously led to the centralized control of the monetary system. And more than 100 years later, we are experiencing the major consequences of that. Another example. 100 years ago, the passport in the form that we know of today did not exist. And they implemented these mandatory passports in 1920 when they met for the League of Nations. They imposed these mandatory forms of identification in order to protect everyone and in the name of safety. But of course, it was just for control. And they actually discussed abolishing passports after World War II. But we obviously know how that ended. Another example. Who here remembers getting on a plane without involving any major security precautions? Well, I don't. I've only been involved with going to the airport post 9/11, which obviously involves taking off your shoes, showing your ID, and the lot. But if it was so important, why are you able to pay your way out of taking off your shoes? But of course, again, all of these measures were implemented in the name of safety. Starting to see a trend here. But of course, all of these safety implementations are only required for those who can't afford a private jet. So just recently, they tried enforcing vaccine passports, bone contact tracing, extreme limitation of freedom of movement, and more. So how did we get here?
So as you've noticed, go ahead with this one.
Nothing is so important as a temporary government program. Milton Friedman said this, and he couldn't have been more right.
As you can see, the crisis is when your power is taken away from you. And Jessica only mentioned a couple that are relevant to the flag theory, but outside of that, there are so many more draconian regulatory changes and the removal of your privacies that do take place in a moment of crisis. You do not function properly in a moment of crisis. Your family doesn't function properly in a moment of crisis. And that's what they want, because this allows them to implement the changes that you would have otherwise rejected. But we have good news. The crisis ends when the system starts.
As Bitcoiners, we typically tend to have an overall prepper mentality, whether that's for supply chain collapse, natural disasters, and much more. But if you're a new Bitcoiner, get ready to go down a bunch of different rabbit holes because it is just never ending. But this is exactly why we all Bitcoin. Currency collapse, inflation, the seizure of our savings. This is exactly what we are well hedged against. Now, I don't want to get political. If you want to see that, you can go to my Twitter. I've got plenty on there. But in all seriousness, today we are solely talking about the facts. And the fact is, the government does not put your needs in priority, because they never do. They really don't care about you. And one of the realest big threats that you can encounter is a state actor attack. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm not a criminal. I'm not planning to overthrow the government. I'm not a bad person. So why would I encounter a state actor?
Well, we have a couple of examples where totally law-abiding citizens still got fucked by the government. You all familiar with the event we refer to as 6102. Basically, in 1933, Roosevelt signed an executive order saying forbidding the holding of gold coins. So how far are we from forbidding the hodling of Bitcoin? And we already see some European nations trying to incentivize you to hold your coins on a centralized custodian exchange, just so one day they can easily seize it, right?
Another example of how a perfectly law-abiding citizen could be encountered in a state actor attack is if your passport is revoked. I'll give you an example. There are countries such as Cyprus, Malta, and Ireland that can revoke your passport just on the grounds of being against the state through act or speech.
Disloyalty, as they call it.
So at what point will they consider certain speech as acts against the government or disloyalty? I'll give you another example. What if your government attacked a neighboring nation, and whether or not, regardless of whether you're for war or against war, you're completely ostracized from the world, unable to use certain financial instruments, unable to go on certain airlines, unable to travel the world, and you're basically stuck unless you have a second passport. One final example that hasn't happened too long ago. During World War II, the Jews literally had to get fake passports in order to escape persecution and most likely death. So, if you don't realize by now, I have some unfortunate news. The state hates you. And even though it may look pretty in pink, I can assure you it's not pretty at all. And as radical as it may sound to some of you, it's about time we realize it and did something about it.
Preparing against the state actor attack is pretty difficult. I mean, you're standing against that gigantic machine with a monopoly on violence and a money printer. So basically, in this position, you have three options. You can fight, hide, or run. I believe you should be mentally prepared for all three of them, but in my opinion, the most important one is being able to physically leave. Because in this scenario, you will still be able to fight from afar, and you are kind of hiding from your attacker just by being outside of your attacker's reach. And that allows your family, again, to just thrive against being in a moment of crisis. I know that fleeing a country and relocating, it's a pretty big deal, but there are only two things that are absolutely necessary. Number one is being able to bring your money. If only there was an asset that provides you with radical ownership and an ability to move all of your wealth in a borderless manner, maybe one day. And number two, having your papers in order for your plan B. Basically, be ready for your passport to be weakened or revoked. Make sure that you're welcome in the country in the other jurisdiction that you're going to. And one thing that we like to say is look through the enemies of your enemy. Basically, try to find allies within the enemies of your current enemy to make sure that you're still welcome there. What else should I say?
8 to 12 months.
Oh, next.
Thankfully, we've got number one figured out with Bitcoin. Thank God someone created it for us. But now when we're talking about number two, making sure you're welcomed wherever you end up. Of course, the ultimate solution to this is a second passport. But, of course, luckily, there are other options. You could utilize tools such as permanent residency, real estate, aka a bug-out home, offshore banking, or having a foreign business entity. And when we talk about stacking these different flags, this is what we mean. You want to capture flags in different jurisdictions that benefit you in various ways. And you might be asking yourself, well, what are the right set of flags that I should gather? Well, I wish I could answer this for you. Unfortunately, there are no right set of flags, as it's very particular to your situation and what your threats and attack vectors are. But luckily, this is what we do on a daily basis. In regards to picking the right flags, you really need to be able to change your plan if necessary, because the world is ever changing, unfortunately.
Yeah, in the current world, finding a jurisdiction that is not crazy, power hungry, is getting more and more difficult. And, pretty much half of the countries now have like a totalitarian regime on the horizon somewhere close by. World leaders change, your priorities change, jurisdiction, regulations, it all changing. But thankfully, we have Bitcoin that is going to be the moral compass, the truth upon which we will build a better societal structures. Energy finds the path of least resistance, water flows downhill, and Bitcoiners will find a place that they're welcome. Borderless money enables jurisdictional arbitrage to get on a whole another level by removing their ability to hold your money hostage. It also takes away their ability to print endless resources to support their violence. And once the free market between nations is truly established, there will be a whole transfer of dynamic of power between authority and people. And this brings upon a societal transformation, again, bringing back power to the people. Now the governments will have just two options. They can regulate Bitcoin and get burned, or they'll have to stay humble and stack sats. And that involves attracting Bitcoiners, providing them with the service they want for the price they agree. And just like that, the sovereign individual thesis plays out. We bring free market to nation states and now forcing them to compete for your wealth and fruits of your labor. These days, we see certain states trying to, regulate Bitcoin, trying to make it illegal, while we also see other states spreading the Bitcoin adoption by making it a legal tender. We also see states trying to, tax you or your capital gains at 40%, or even tax your unrealized capital gains, while we, at the same time, see other nations that provide you zero capital gains tax on your Bitcoin. The choice is yours.
At Plan B Passport, we help people to put themselves in certain jurisdictions based on their needs. And we work with Bitcoiners solely just because we love the Bitcoin community. We understand your pain points, your goals, and most importantly, your values. And you're able to submit an application with us, schedule a free call, and we're able to help you create your customized flag theory strategy. But we will not be embracing this new future of you will own nothing and be happy. And I don't know about you, but that's just not the future I'll be living in. And if you can implement a plan in order to escape whatever threats are coming your way, you're able to create a plan B. And authority just doesn't have power over 8 billion people. And we come full circle where you have a group of very, very few people wanting to control the many. And people have always had the power. It's just about time that we utilize it and harness it. And when you separate money from state, it just gives us another level of empowerment. And freedom is beautiful. Bitcoin is the freedom tool. And there's no reason why 8 billion people in the world shouldn't be able to embrace it.
Bitcoin has changed the game of jurisdictional arbitrage by completely removing the problem of asset protection. We all know that SHA-256 is the ultimate asset protection mechanism. And now Bitcoiners are also changing the game by proving that there's another extremely important flag, such as tribe. We can get together as a tribe, as a community of like-minded people, freedom-minded people, and just enforce the better future on those who doesn't want us to see thrive.
Bitcoiners, we appreciate you, and we will win.
Thank you. You can always find us around here. We're happily to talk about the passports and all that stuff with anybody.
Yep.
Find us at planbpassport.com or on Twitter, Katie the Russian and Jessica Hodlr.
Back to the Bitcoin Magazine live desk here at Bitcoin Amsterdam, sponsored by Bitco. I'm Natalie Brunel, and I'm so excited to be joined by two legends in the space, Jeff Booth and Greg Foss, here with me. You just heard from Jessica and Katie the Russian on Short the State, and that talk kind of made me want to renew my European Union passport because things are getting crazier and crazier. We have a great panel that's coming up, but first, there's so much news that happened in the last 24 hours that is relevant to Bitcoin. We had JP Morgan Chase basically say that Kanye's company Yeezy can't bank with them, but then we had some good news with the fair accounting update. So I just wanted to hear your takes because lots of things are developing while we're here in Amsterdam.
It's been a crazy time, Nat. I would just say this, that JP Morgan news is just one more example of a TradFi financial institution that's imposing restrictions on their clients that is very dangerous for not just freedom, but also for capitalism, for the ability of a small company, or in the case of Kanye, obviously a very large company, to have confidence that his funds are accessible without any sort of censorship. Now, they weren't censoring it. They actually said your account has been closed. You have 1 month to find new. That's not a great situation. Imagine if you had other things going on in your company at that point, and here all of a sudden your banking relationship has been terminated. Not bullish on the TradFi system, very bullish for Bitcoin, quite simple.
Well, and you sort of experienced something similar, of a scare in Canada, right? Because the bank accounts are being closed. So
that was because of Jeff Booth. And over to you, Jeff. No, I'm kidding.
No, but centralization creates weakness in the system, and that centralization must create more and more coercion and control. And when you build your life onto that system, and that what you believe are the rules of that system change and impact your life, you start to wake up to what's actually happening in the world today, and that you saw it with PayPal, and you see it here. You're seeing it more and more in places where you're not expecting, and it's all caused from the very same system. The system must continue taking more of our individual rights and freedoms away from us. And that creates, like the last panel talked about, the geographical arbitrage as people move to Bitcoin.
Yeah, you know, I woke up to the story, and what I thought was really interesting is this is a man who built $1 billion company, a black man in America who built $1 billion company, who now a private company is saying whether or not he can access the economy. And meanwhile, JP Morgan Chase would not have the power that it has were it not for the government, right, making it too big to fail.
That's a great point. I frequently say that large banks, commercial banks that are levered 25 to 1 are frequently insolvent, and they really are if they were to mark their book to market, yet everybody assumes that they're so safe and so risk-free. Well, they're leading a business that they think they have the ability to shut out entrepreneurs. I think this is an example of legacy thinking that won't succeed in the world going forward. It's that simple. It's a risky business, and they're making it more risky with bad management decisions, in my opinion.
Okay, real quick, 30 seconds, because we're going to the next panel, but good news on the fair accounting. Saylor tweeted this. You know, summarize it for people that don't get it.
Very simply, you don't have to write down the value of your Bitcoin holdings to market. It's an ability for MicroStrategy to hold Bitcoin in the long term and not be hit by short-term price fluctuations.
And corporations in general, bringing the institutions in. So this is great.
Yes.
All right. Well, we have another great panel coming up here at the Bitcoin Amsterdam conference, sponsored by Bitco. It is the Euro panel. So parity with the Euro dollar. So we're going to hear all about that from some great panelists right now.